Now we'll hear from Ann Benson, the directing attorney of the Washington Defender Association's Immigration Project.
Thank you for having me here to speak tonight. I want to thank Mayor Sandoval and all of the folks who have put a lot of effort into organizing it. It's great to see a crowd of so many folks out here. I am hoping that my PowerPoint, here we go, the PowerPoint presentation is going to come up here. I'm going to focus my comments tonight on two areas. First, I'm going to provide folks with a bit of context about immigration issues and immigration law. And then I'm going to talk about your constitutional rights in the context of law enforcement, because I've gotten a lot of questions from folks in the community, and I'm really hoping before we enter into the questions tonight that I might be able to give you at least some context, if not answer some of those questions. Okay, so to start off with, immigration law is a civil law. It is not criminal law. It's a federal law. It's the same across the entire United States. It's not particular to Washington. These laws apply everywhere in the country. And in particular, it's not a crime to be present in the United States without lawful immigration status. That is a civil violation. It's subject to the penalty for that being a violation is that you are subject to being deported. Anyone who is not a U.S. citizen is always at risk of deportation if you violate immigration law. And that happens to be the case regardless of how long you've lived here, what your family or community ties are, regardless of whether you have a green card or whether you face persecution. If you violate immigration laws, the immigration agents can apprehend you and put you in deportation, or what are now called removal proceedings. To deport a person, however, the government is required to prove that the person is not a U.S. citizen. It's their job to be able to prove that you are not a U.S. citizen if they want to remove you, because only U.S. citizens can be removed. The government gets the required evidence in most cases because people don't understand their right to remain silent, and they come forward and they admit that they were born in Mexico or that they are here without legal immigration status. There are two primary agencies in the Department of Homeland Security that are engaged in immigration enforcement. We've heard a lot tonight about the Customs and Border Patrol. And there is also the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. ICE is they're known, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is responsible for the interior enforcement of the immigration laws. And just so you know, that they, in terms of your tax dollars, they get a lot of our money. To do this work. We fund a tremendous amount of our tax dollars are spent on these efforts. ICE alone's request of the federal government for next year's budget is $5.6 billion. I want to point out here that many undocumented people, simply because they are undocumented, actually have avenues for obtaining lawful immigration status. It's very difficult to do. It's a very complex Byzantine process to go forward and get your lawful immigration status, even if you have lawyers and lots of resources. Somebody once said to me a few years ago that another lawyer said, wow, immigration law is more complicated than tax law these days. So it's a difficult process. However, it's important to keep in mind that just because someone is undocumented doesn't mean that they don't have options and avenues for getting lawful status, and I've listed 3 of them here. But I'll carry on to the next slide for issues of time. When you are faced with being deported, you have the right to be represented by a lawyer in deportation proceedings. However, a very significant distinction between civil immigration proceedings and criminal proceedings is that if you can't afford a lawyer, the government is not obligated to provide you with one. And 85% of the people who are being deported from the United States are being unrepresented because they can't afford to have a lawyer. Most people are entitled to a hearing before an immigration judge. However, the majority of people waive this right to a hearing before an immigration judge because they can't really bear the possibility of prolonged immigration detention, which more and more people are being subjected to. I believe right now, at any given moment, there's in the nearly somewhere around 100 immigration detention centers around the country. They are detaining upwards of somewhere in the neighborhood of 25,000 people on any given day. I'm sorry? Oh, actually, Shankar just corrected me. It's actually 39,000 people now. I'm sorry, 30. 30? Okay, okay. It's a lot. Yeah. To be technical about it, it's a lot. In our local region, non-citizens who are facing deportation are detained at the Northwest Regional Detention Center, which has, to this day, right now it has 1,000 beds, which are always full. They are so full that they're expanding it sometime within the next year to 1,500 beds. Immigration detention is worse than jail. If you want to go and Google immigration detention on the web, you'll be stunned to actually see what's happening in the immigration detention arena. It has been rapidly expanding in these past years. There is extensive documentation of human rights violations that people are incurring in immigration detention. And it's really, really difficult to fight your deportation case, to try and go forward and get lawful status, to present a case to the judge, to really, as I said, fight deportation when you're in detention. And most people who are in detention are really desperate to get out because they have families and people who are relying on them. And so that is a huge motivation for many people actually waiving their right to a hearing before a judge and just accepting deportation. It's important to point out in the current debates that we're having about immigration that 2/3 of the immigrants or non-citizens in the United States are actually here with lawful immigration status. And until 1996, Canadians were the largest group of undocumented people in the United States. I always love being able to say that. Usually I ask people to identify who the largest group was, and Canadians never come up. Interestingly, Mexican nationals only became the largest group of undocumented people 2 years after the passage of NAFTA. Over 12 million undocumented people, so the numbers vary. Sometimes you're 10, sometimes you're 15. General estimates in the work that we do generally put the number somewhere around 12 million undocumented people in the United States. And estimates are, and the Border Patrol folks I'm sure can talk about this even with more precision than I can, but somewhere around 500, about 500,000 people keep arriving here every year. The vast majority of these people are from Mexico and Central America. And poverty, which is not surprising to anyone I'm sure, is the overwhelming factor that's driving this migration. Some statistics for you. I'm going to actually move through these really quickly here. And the most interesting statistic that you might find is that 12% of our population here in Washington is foreign-born, and in the King-Pierce-Snohomish region, that's 20% of the population are foreign-born. I would put out there to you, not to in any way take away from the good work that the folks here are doing, but that the current immigration policies that we have are really not an effective solution to the immigration crisis that we're facing. I'm not going to go into detail about what I think that is, but it is, however, it's not solving our immigration problem, as I think the numbers clearly reveal. And one of my favorite things to point out is that we can seal the borders tomorrow, triple the resources, and it will take us 20 years to deport all the undocumented people who are already here.